Mr. Malhotra is partner of TMT Law Practice from New Delhi. He will be giving his talk on involuntary licensing music to its ears.
Hi, good morning to all. So, as part of this overall session of copyright limitations and exceptions, I would be speaking on what I refer to as involuntary licensing, which is also referred to as non-voluntary licensing. The principal justification, and I'm sure all of you've heard and sort of aware of with regard to the protection of intellectual property rights in general and copyright specifically, is that it operates as a reward for the author or the owner to create and share with the general public the fruits of their creativity, and in just sort of to prod them to do that and to incentivize that, they are rewarded with this limited monopoly. That limited monopoly, as I said, serves this purpose, that the particular product of that creativity should reach out to the public maximum. The outreach should be as much as possible. But what if this particular goal is not realized? It could probably not be realized in either of the 2 or 3 instances. One could be where the owner or the author deliberately he refuses to license the work to the public, and as a result creates this sort of requirement for that work to reach the public. The second instance is where the owner or author controls it to such an extent that the amount of dissemination that's required really is not met. The third categorization is where the compensation that is requested, or the rate of royalty or tariff or whatever you may call it, that is asked for by the author or the owner is excessive or unreasonable. Thankfully, the law addresses those situations as well, and takes care of the situation that the primary purpose of intellectual property protection is not compromised. That could be done in the form of what is largely referred to as non-voluntary licensing. Under that, we have the categorizations of compulsory licensing and statutory licensing. The difference between the two, principally, is that whereas in a statutory licensing scheme, the rate of royalty is fixed by law, in a compulsory licensing situation, the rate of royalty is left either for negotiation or determination by an independent tribunal or a court of law. But in either case, the important aspect is that the use of that intellectual property or of that work cannot be restricted or refused. That's the underlying principle of a non-voluntary license. Where do we get the basis for non-voluntary licenses? The first non-voluntary license was what came out in a UK Act of 1842, where at that time the period of copyright monopoly was sought to be extended. So they thought that this is an appropriate time, that in case there is a possible abuse of that copyright monopoly, they should try to introduce this concept of a compulsory license in certain situations. Those situations were A, to prevent excessive abuse in view of the sudden increase in the right granted under the Act, or B, to permit people to have access to copyrighted works whose authors have passed away, but the owners of that copyright are trying to limit that access. And the third was in relation to importation of certain copies of copyrighted work into England. That underwent changes from time to time till the 1956 Act, which is what we also derive quite a bit of our legislation from. That Act limited it only to the situation of a 52(1)J situation, where you could create sound recordings based upon literary and musical works which had already been published and already had been incorporated with the consent of the owner of copyright in a sound recording. So it was done with a view to encourage the recording industry. And the rate was law, so it was an into a statutory license, it was 6.25% of the maximum retail price of the product. We find basis for an involuntary licensing situation even in TRIPS under Article 11 Base 2, which is the provision from which we can draw reference for our present Section 31 in relation to broadcast, where you restrict the right of the copyright owner to get only an equitable remuneration, and they effectively lose control of how that particular work is really licensed. And also in Article 13, which is the basis for Section 52(1)(j) which under the older Act, which is now 31C, capital C of the Act. So, having established the jurisprudential basis and that which flows from the various treaties, just wanted to quickly summarize what have been the various arguments advanced in favor of involuntary licensing and arguments advanced against it before I hop into the amended provisions of our Copyright Act and address those specific issues. The justification for granting of these licenses is that it is a compromise on the unrestricted right granted under intellectual property. There are various situations where these could be exercised, primarily being, for example, when there is a development of technology and a refusal to license is actually impeding the growth of a particular industry or industries which seek to benefit from that development of technology. The other one is where the copyright owner fails to avail of the facilities of production and distribution in order to reach that product to as many people as really require it. So they're stinting the supply of that particular product. Then obviously there is a refusal to license or imposition of onerous conditions. That is the third basis. There could be a situation where the negotiated price is really high, and there is a felt need for subsidizing either a particular group or an institution, and that is another instance where you could resort to a justification for non-voluntary licenses. A very important fourth justification, which I think is going to assume significance, primarily because of the fact that we now have a Competition Act as well. Increasing, I think the gentleman from ENIL mentioned yesterday that there is already a complaint pending with the Competition Commission filed by the radio operator against supercassettes, where the specific issue is that there is that admitted monopoly, at least vis-a-vis the newer works that have come into existence post the 90s, and in that situation that that monopoly is being abused to create an adverse impact on competition. So we will await the outcome of that decision, but I just said, abuse of monopoly is a major factor, and it will continue to play a big role in times to come with regard to intellectual property in general and copyright in particular. The criticism to non-voluntary licensing has been three or fourfold. They say that it is contrary to the basic philosophy of copyright that permits for a free market to decide the price of the work in question. It is also criticized that in all probability it is unlikely to achieve the correct rate. Because ultimately, when you're going in for a non-voluntary license, the issue largely is that of what the compensation or the tariff or the royalty rate should be. So they say that there is you really cannot, a negotiation is a much better way of arriving at a proper rate rather than imposing it through a court mandated process. The third one is that it is an administratively cumbersome process. So from a purely economics argument point of view, if you are trying to meet the needs of the people and in that process whittling down the right of the copyright owner to control the manner in which the licensing of his work takes place, then you would want that particular aspect should be sorted out at the earliest. Otherwise, the attendant costs of pursuing a litigation time and again, having to do this determined time and again, is really sort of akin to a protracted negotiation. So it's an administratively it really fails to achieve the objective. And the last one is that it is, it's a very generic sort of a thing, that it is a suspect device, and there could be various vested interests who abuse this particular limitation that is prescribed under the law to achieve their own specific goals. So there are pros and cons. There have been arguments for and against for a fair long period of time, but we have chosen under our law to provide for non-voluntary licensing, and that's sort of what I proceed to now address. Broadly, I'm only going to, as my sort of topic suggests, music to use ears, I'm going to address it in the domain of music because that's where I've also had the good fortune to be involved at a practical level as well. So I'm going to address section 31, section 31C, capital C, and 31C. 31 basically categorizes the right to get a compulsory license under two heads. A, when there is a withholding from the public, and that is in relation to a reproduction or republication of the work, and B, specifically in relation to broadcast, when the demand for royalty is unreasonable or any other condition is unreasonable. So there has been one judgment of the Copyright Board in 2001 or so, where they said that you cannot say that a charging of an unreasonable rate, even for publication, republication of the work, amounts to withholding from the public. So there has to be a clear finding, at least in the absence of judgment post that there is a withholding from the public, and by virtue of that, you need that compulsory license. A more used and more celebrated more in the news provision is 31(1)(b), which is where broadcasters had taken Phonographic Performance Limited to the Copyright Board. That case took its usual route through the Bombay and Delhi High Courts respectively, ended up in the Supreme Court, came back to the Copyright Board, and we had an order in August 2010. But that involved the issue of unreasonableness of conditions imposed while granting a license to broadcast certain works over the radio stations. The argument of PPL and also Supercassettes in that was that they wanted to read A and B, subsections A and B, conjunctively, saying that there has to be withholding even in relation to the issue of broadcasting. So an unreasonableness of tariff alone is not enough. You have to demonstrate that this has led to a withholding from the public, which is Bombay High Court and the Supreme Court very clearly said no to. They said it has to be read disjunctively. There is an and or in between, and they're both two different situations. They have different impacts. This is specifically for the purposes of broadcast, 31(1)(b), and it has to be seen in that light. On the issue of whether the compulsory license must be granted as a matter of right, the Supreme Court reserved its opinion on that, saying that could be instances possibly where a broadcaster approaching the Copyright Board may not be entitled to the compulsory license, and they just left it at that. If we are to really distinguish, if you are going to go to principles of non-voluntary licensing and a distinction between a compulsory license understood in its basic significance and as distinguished from a statutory license, I think that's the only issue is that the rate is something which needs to be determined. So the absolute refusal to grant or in even an argument to take that you are not entitled to get a compulsory license at all is something which, from the origins of the term of compulsory license itself, may be little incongruous and may be difficult to digest. But if the situation which was envisaged in that judgment and put forward is that there is an egregious default and there is an open out-and-out infringement of copyright happening, and only subsequently that person comes to the Copyright Board, is that person still entitled to the compulsory license? Open question. But again, if you are to go to the principles of compulsory license, I think the restriction on grant need not be there. It's only a question of how to determine that royalty and what that royalty needs to be. As I said, the Copyright Board in 2010 has come out with a determination. Even though I was representing the radio industry, and I hope that I'm not quoted out of this forum, but as an objective analysis of that judgment, there are certain bases on which that judgment definitely can be sort of challenged. Primarily that being that it is an overarching implication of who the categorization of the entire music industry to which this particular principle, this rate can be applied to, because as correctly held by the Delhi High Court in one of the appeals filed, you have to follow the principles of natural justice and you have to provide an opportunity for all to be heard. The argument perhaps of the Copyright Board would be that this is not an adversarial position where proceedings where one person is against the other. It's an inquiry. The word used under Section 31 is an inquiry, and when it is an inquiry, it has a much broader significance. And when we decide that particular matter, as in general, it must apply to the music industry or to the radio industry in general. So, the matter is pending before the Madras High Court. We will see what the outcome of that decision is. Moving on to 31C, this is 521J in New Avatar. Two primary distinctions, whereas the moratorium under 521J was 2 years after publication of the sound recording. In this case, it's been increased to 5 years. The interesting proviso that's been introduced is that the exploitation of that work, the version recording or the cover version, should be in the same medium as that of the original sound recording. The purely from an analysis point of view, also with the background that the similar was introduced under the 1956 UK Act in order to encourage the fledgling recording industry, we have to figure out the basis for why we are according this protection or this limitation at all. If to promote the recording industry, maybe this justification, the proviso makes sense. But another justification given for this 521J at the time of enactment was that this also will operate as a medium of encouraging new performers, because for a performer to bridge the gap between the performance and reaching out to the intended audience, usually the audience would like to hear an established performer rendering a particular song. But so if that initial handicap is taken out and they are allowed to perform a particular song which is already known, then it may help them in actually displaying their real skills of the voice and what have you. So if the reason for coming out with 31C and persisting with 31C is to protect the performers as well and to give them another platform, then maybe this aspect of the same medium may not achieve its purpose. And also with the advancement of technology in the manner in which it is advancing, and the fact that there is a continued move towards the digital sort of space, one doesn't know whether this is really will pan out in the way it was supposed to be intended. Moving on to 31D, hotly tested. I mean, it has not gone to court as yet, but it's already raising quite a few decibels in the relevant forums. This is a statutory license, at least it's referred to as a statutory license under 31D of the Act. But if one were to analyze the provisions and compare it with, again, the essence of what a statutory license is, then I would, it's my position that it is in human substance, and the way it sort of pans out, it is more akin to a compulsory license. For the reasons, A, that unlike the statutory license historically, there is no fixed rate by law, by statute. It is left to the determination of the Copyright Board. And in the, at least in the draft rules that have been in circulation, there is a particular time limit that is sought to be prescribed for that particular rate. So in that sense, it is closer to a compulsory license, because you may need to review that rate and go back to the Copyright Board to decide on what that rate should be. Second thing is, the statutory license is applicable only after the work is published. Now, again, coming back to the aspect as to whether there is a rate fixed by law or not. If there was a rate fixed by law, you wouldn't need to wait for the publication of that work. And even from an administrative point of view, when you seek to exercise that right, because you have to give prior notice, you have to give notice to the owner of copyright, then it requires that amount of trail to be followed. So every time a work is published and you intend to use it under this provision, then you need to give notice of that, which again, to my view, is closer to a compulsory license situation than a statutory license. So
you have 2 minutes.
Yes, just winding up. Subsection 3 of the 31D is another sort of ground for a lot of debate and maybe possibly litigation, is whereas there is no such mention in the rest of the provision as to whether this applies only to radio and television, 31D3 seems to suggest, it says that while deciding the rate, there will be a separate rate for radio and separate rate for television. So is it the intention of legislature to limit this particular right only to radio and television broadcasts? Or is it that this is only to demonstrate that for different industries there should be a different rate fixed? Now, the reason why I say so is because we have only one definition of broadcast under the Act. And at the time when that definition was enacted, it was to give the maximum benefit to the owner of the basic copyrighted works, which are the literary, dramatic, artistic, musical, and sound recording and cinematograph films. If we are to use the same yardstick for defining what a broadcast organization could be, then it could potentially, there would be an argument that it includes the internet as well and webcasting as well, and streaming as well. So with that, as of now, this has not been litigated. It is likely to be. Let's see what the courts decide on this aspect. I'm just leaving the issues open for the House. Just to end, one more aspect of how a non-voluntary licensing situation can arise is under 33 capital A2, where we've reverted to the pre-94 position where the societies were required to come out with the tariff scheme, and they were still required to do so after 94, but there could be a specific challenge to the tariff scheme, which has now been brought back under 33 A2. And while the person who's challenging that needs to continue to pay the royalty as prescribed, but there is a situation provided where there could be an interim order. So that's basically it with regard to non-voluntary licensing, and I leave the floor open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abhishek. Give me a big hand. 2 questions, please, because paucity of time, we'll have 2 questions, and then remaining doubts can be cleared during the lunch break.
Thanks, Abhishek. Very quick question. You mentioned the one of the justifications being the Competition Act. I'm not an expert on Competition Act, but doesn't the Competition Act somewhere say that whatever is done under the copyright and is outside the purview of this? So then how does this kind of...
No, it doesn't say that. What it says is that merely it recognizes the fact that there is a monopoly granted under the various intellectual property rights. So merely because a monopoly is granted does not necessarily entitle it for being, sort of restrained under the competition analysis. But if you can demonstrate that by virtue of this admitted monopoly or dominant position, if you can demonstrate that there is actually an adverse impact on competition, then you can actually take action under the competition.
So it's basically...
So merely because it is monopoly, merely because it is IP, because that's a given, you can't sort of bring it under.
So it's again the similar analogy to that there can be no abuse of dominance.
Correct, absolutely. So you have to follow the principles of competition law regardless.
Okay, thanks.
So just one question about 31C, which I've never quite been able to figure out. 31C3 talks about, and as did J, talks about the person making such sound recording shall not make any alteration in the literary or musical work which has not been previously made, etc. What is the real reason for making this kind of limitation? Because if you think of cover versions, they're not always, sometimes the music might change a little bit, sometimes the lyrics might change a little bit, and On the one hand, you want them to stick to a very strict formula, make only the voice different, don't make anything else different. On the other hand, you want them to have nothing to do with the original by having all these requirements, which go beyond just the requirements of not having a similar cover, etc., not having similar artwork, etc. That goes beyond just earlier in 51J. It was more 52.1J. It was more in terms of you shall not deceive others. Okay, now it's much stricter. On one hand, you don't want any affiliation with the original. On the other hand, you want full affiliation with the original. And I see a kind of tension here. Could you explain that?
I think the basis for both these this apparent conflict stems from the fact that firstly, let me just clarify that the reason why there's a specific stipulation that you will not copy you will submit the covers, etc., that you're going to put in, etc., that stems from that Ma's recording judgment, where there is a clear delineation that this is how we are going to interpret the deception and the unfair trade practice angle. But I think the primary reason for this is a limitation to copyright infringement, right? So when you are providing for a limitation, you would want to construe it as strictly as possible. You would not want to depart from the intended purpose for this limitation, and whatever fits that particular purpose, you will limit yourself to only that. Now, what fits that purpose is, as I said, the two possible justifications for this could be that you want to encourage the recording industry. They should not have to invest that additional cost which is going into the making of the first sound recording, or performers. In either situation, you don't need to alter the lyrics or the music. The creativity that you're looking at displaying to the general public could be reserved for an original work. But for this particular purpose of making the cover version, at least the presumption is that if you are able to stick to the lyrics and the music as is, and just come out with the version which is what is really intended by the section, then that purpose is served. So I think that's the entire basis for doing that.
Yeah, thank you, Abhishek.